Perfect. Great. Then a very warm welcome to everybody on this, on my side, sunny Friday. I'm very happy to welcome you to this fourth session, which is co-hosted by the WageIndicator Foundation and the Democratizing Work Network. We are hosting a series of webinar discussions about the future of work, democratization of work, as well as topics around the world of work that we feel like this deserve a bit more attention or a bit more reflection. And the topic of the meeting of today is about the role of unions and the changing role of unions in society. But we will also be looking at this not only from a union perspective, but also from a researcher and from a journalist perspective. So we have a couple of great speakers in the room and a beautiful and brilliant moderator for today. I will quickly introduce them to you before we kick us off. Like I said in the beginning, please mute yourself while other people are speaking, but the session is also intended to be an open dialogue. So if you have questions for the speakers, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll pick them up during the Q&A dialogue session. Please be mindful of the fact that we are discussing a political topic, so please respect everybody's opinion as well as privacy in this. And what we discuss in this session is really intended to be an open dialogue for reflection. So that being said, if you're able to put on your video, that would be great, because then we know a little bit of who's in the room as well. And like I mentioned, feel free to engage in the conversation as well. We will first kick it off with a small introduction from the speakers, and then some Q&A with the speakers moderated by Flora, our moderator, and then we will open the floor for everybody else to join in the conversation as well. We will keep to the timing, so we'll stop after 1.5 hours so everybody can enjoy the rest of their Friday. And I hope you enjoyed the session. I'm here to welcome with us today our moderator, Flora Pereira, who's the Chief of Education and Engagement at the Pulitzer Center. The Pulitzer Center is a center for journalists as well to work on specific topics. We met each other at a conference a year ago, and I was really impressed with the work that they are doing. And next to leading the work at the Pulitzer Center, she is also a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Economics at Coimbra University in the Post-Colonialism and Global Citizenship doctoral program. With us today, we also have Joanna Bronivica, who's a sociologist and activist at the Center for Interdisciplinary Labor Law Studies at the European University of Viandrina, and has previously been the director of the Center for Internet and Human Rights. Her interests cross disciplinary and national borders as she combines sociology, law, and political science to examine the effects of digitization and migration on industrial relations and politics. And she's currently researching mobilization of platform workers in Berlin. With us as well, we have Eyüp Özer, who's the International Secretary of the Turkey's United Metal Workers Union, which is part of the Confederation of Progressive Trade Unions in Turkey. He's been with the organization for over 10 years and is currently focusing his efforts on the just transition and the impact on work in Turkey and beyond. We also have Mikyung Ryu with us, who's the International Director of the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions that has over 1.2 million members from all around Korea. KCTU is also the representative body of independent and democratic trade unions of the democratic trade union movement in Korea. And they take a leading role in a broader social movement as well in South Korea. And with us today, we also have Pawanjot Kaur, who's a journalist from India, who's been doing research on the coal transition in India, and who will be reflecting with us on that topic specifically. Flora, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with this half hat of journalism and engage, and the other half is academic, then trying to glue all the pieces together of the amazing panelists we have today. And we had a couple of prep sections, training sections to see what was the best glue that we could discuss today, to find common ground that the four panelists had among them, and how we would make this conversation more interesting. And I think one phrase that stood out to me, it was on the second brief that Mickey was sharing about the rule, going back to the roots, and share about the role of the unions, that is to represent works, but also as principle to increase the strength of one as individual and amplify that one's voice. But to do that, they need to organize, to be organized. And I think that thought about why people organize and what are the challenges and what they have learned. What I found was could be interesting as start point of this conversation, because as you will see, we'll have different experience from UNER to researchers, journalists studying about this phenomenon, that it's why do people start organizing and when does that work, when does that not work? Of course, in the world of worker, that is the goal of the conversation today. So with that question in mind, I would like to call each one of the panelists, starting with Joanna, to introduce themselves, talk about more or less 5 minutes, and to present their work and what they do. Joanna, with you.
Hello, everyone. I am joining you today from Berlin, where I've been living for 10 years. And I work as a researcher at a German university on the border with Poland. I'm a sociologist at the labor law department, where we do interdisciplinary labor law studies. And I focus on worker organizations, not strictly unions, but more the newly established worker organizations, especially in sectors affected by digital transformation. And I study the role of law, gender, and organizational forms. I'm also a sociologist of organizations, and the role they play in the development of these initiatives, because I think they can provide us with some sort of a unique perspective on what the question that is a burning question, both practically and theoretically, which is the question of what is the model of organizing workers for the 21st century. So it's a normative question, and I look for evidence in these workers' organizations to see how workers are already organizing, what is the model as it is now. But I think it's important to mention that I'm also a migrant in Germany. I originally come from Poland, which gives me a bit of a different perspective on the labor movement in Germany, which is very vibrant. And compared to the country where I'm from, Germany has strong labor laws and strong union movement, even though membership has been declining. Unions still very much set the tone, and I think the mission of unions to defend working conditions is still very much generally shared in the society. But still, many workers choose to organize outside of the unions. And my question is why? But I also study the worker organizations outside of the unions to understand how they organize. And I don't know if you see my presentation, but
no, I can. Should I share it now?
Yes, because I wanted to show you the picture that I took yesterday. I was participating in a demonstration yesterday with my daughter, where I went with my daughter and the staff from the childcare facility, who were protesting because they were promised a bonus for a bonus payment for living in the capital. And that could now be taken away from them by the Berlin politicians, and the childcare and all the pedagogical personnel in the city gathered in front of the government building in Berlin to protest against that. And we were there. And I think I wanted to share this with you in general, even though it's not really an example from my field work, but I think it illustrates very well something that is important, which is that the importance of the care professionals in our society, in German society. I think that's really rising in importance. But it also shows, it's a good example of the fact that even though Germany has very high collective agreement coverage, not all, there's so many professionals that are not covered by that because they're in workplaces that are not unionized, but also in care sector in particular, there are a lot of self-employed workers, for example, domestic workers or live-in care. So I think the organization of self-employed solo entrepreneurs is also very important, which is why I wanted to tell you about this example from my research, which is the Fair Yoga Initiative. As you can probably imagine, yoga teachers are also self-employed and work rather in isolation from each other. But during Corona times, it became clear that the platforms that offer this membership that you can then use in different gyms and studios are really changing the rules of the games rules of the game for this profession, which is why they decided to create the Fair Yoga Initiative and resist the platforms and convince the customers on one hand that it would be a better idea to support local studios, and also to lobby the government that perhaps these platforms can have detrimental effect on a lot of on yoga professions, but also on other professions that are now affected by platform capitalism. Corona was also a time where Guerrillas Workers Collective really catapulted themselves into the public opinion. This is also an example from platform economy. We are talking about platform for delivering groceries that really exploded during Corona. And the guerrillas stunned the world not only because they organized a couple waves of wildcat strikes in Berlin, very successful ones, but also because a couple of months later, they elected a works council, which is another form of organizing in the German system of labor relations, entirely made out of migrants. So they really defied the stereotype that migrants do not care about labor law and don't know how to use it as a resource. They certainly did that. And I think also in general, Berlin is an interesting place to study these worker organizations because not only precarious workers are organizing in this way, but also the more affluent tech workers in the vibrant IT sectors. And the next and the last slide I want to show you is the Berlin Tech Worker Coalition, which includes both the high-earning professionals, but also the lower-paid content moderators for the tech giants. They are also setting up works councils rather than organizing through unions. So what do we see with these new forms of organizing? I think that the workers that organize this way, like myself, still very much believe in the original union mission, but they are critical of them as organizations. They often use the phrase they are dinosaurs. And I think they mainly refer to the exactly organizational form and organizational structures. And they prefer to organize in flat hierarchies, open their membership. There's not this idea of having a membership card. And they really pay the attention to the diversity, and they deploy a lot of intersectional practices. So I am very interested in studying these organizational forms and practices because I think and I hope that unions can learn from them to change from within. At least I really much believe that unions are capable of changing within, and I think that they can look at these outside organizations as worker organizations as sort of their guiding post. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And we thought about now passing to Ayub also.
Hi, okay. As our colleagues already mentioned, I'm connecting from Turkey. I'm from Birleşik Metal İş, it's United Metal Workers Union. So as the name suggests, we organize metal workers. That's no surprise for anyone, I guess, in that case for that one. So yesterday when I heard about the topic of the discussion, I said, oh, that's great. So we can talk about everything going under the sun. So it's about whatever happens in the world, we can just talk about that. But maybe before starting that, it's better to give a background on the organizing in Turkey. When it comes to the trade union organizing, Turkey is one of the worst countries, maybe the worst. I don't know. But then Mickey would probably say that no, it's not. And then the Korea might be she might that. So, well, in Turkey we have a complete lack of democracy on freedom of association. And when I say lack of democracy on freedom of association, I'm just being polite, actually. So, I mean, so there is no real right to organize. Just to give you an example. If you want to organize a union in your workplace, you need to have 50% plus one of entire workforce to join that union. And when you join that union, you have to do it through the government website, which is called e-state, so that it can be tracked down as well. And sometimes employers can learn about that as well. And when you join a union, almost it's 100% sure that there will be a dismissal in the organizing process at all. So these are just a few examples. So we are talking about a country which is almost impossible to independently organize, but still there's organizing going on. And these difficulties, internal difficulties of union organizing in Turkey, actually takes place in a time where there are also external difficulties, where there's this, as some people would call polycrisis of the world going on around us. So on the one hand, there's this climate crisis and its effects on the workers and their workers' rights. On the other hand, there's this geopolitical disorder, and on the other hand, there's of course this economical crisis and so on, and this great power rivalries. Some might think that why would, let's say, competition between China and Europe would affect the worker in Turkey? It would, actually. So I will just give you an example. Last week, we had this mass redundancy in a company where we are organized, a solar panel producer. So these are the new, let's say, fashionable jobs, these solar panels or wind turbines and etc. So we are organizing those companies in Turkey. So we have organized several solar panel producers in Turkey, and there was mass redundancies because these were Chinese multinationals investing in Turkey. Even though we have collective bargaining agreements there, so we had somehow relationship with the companies as well. And because of the EU regulations to compete with China, then the EU market was closed down for these Chinese exports, even though coming from Turkey. And then this led to dismissals in Turkey. So that's why we can say that whatever happens in one part of the world affects the workers in the other part of the world as well. And also in Turkey, there's a saying, they say that when elephants fight, the grass will smashed. It doesn't make sense when you translate literally, but yeah, it sounds something like that. And in this background, of course, then it comes to the discussion on trade union cooperation around the world. And lately, we hear lots of discussions with especially our Western European colleagues on just transition, how just transition will affect the jobs and how will it affect the people in the other countries as well. So when we hear that discussion from our Western colleagues, actually, we understand that we are living in two separate realities. On the one hand, countries like Turkey, which is an export-oriented economy since the customs union agreement in 1996, I guess, and it exports to the EU without any customs. So this means that where you have lack of freedom of association, no unions, you have cheap labor, no regulations at all, but you also have the customs union, which you don't have to pay any customs tax. So it means that it attracts some production from the West. So then we have different priorities than our colleagues in the Western Europe, where they are losing their jobs because of moving of the production, and they are afraid of losing even more jobs because of the climate crisis. And their response mostly, as with this kind of silver bullet word they always use, just transition, is to give more resources to the companies. So they want to give public money to the companies where they can invest more on the infrastructure or invest more on their businesses. But for our side, it's exactly opposite. It's quite contrary. In our case, where there's already a moving production to country and where there is let's say, not decent jobs in the country, then these jobs created through these new investments are not really decent jobs. So in our case, we say that, look, if companies want to invest in their infrastructure, they have to do it from their pocket instead of public pockets. And that's why we, in our union, we discussed on some other kind of policy measures on how should we talk about this just transition debate when it comes to the issue. I know that I only have 1 minute more, I guess, but I will just be very quick when we talk. So that's why we think that we have to think about a new set of demands. For example, reduction of working time for in order to compensate the job losses coming from the change of the industry. And also, we always think that, and we always discuss that the climate crisis is not happening because of the eco responsibilities of all the countries. It was mostly a result of the profit of huge multinationals, especially in the fossil fuel companies in the past, but also many companies. And this is not evenly distributed among the countries in the world. So then there has to be some kind of an international mechanism to compensate the losses of the developing countries through wealth tax or some kind of taxation through the rich countries, or especially from the fossil fuel companies, and etc. So I just used my 5 minutes, so maybe I can go afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I will definitely go back to those topics, both from Joanna in the way people are finding looking for a new and flatter way of organizing, an intersectional approach to it as well, and also from EUP as a huge poly crisis that we are living, and how we have certain narratives that we will apply in a piece of the world, but definitely doesn't apply to others, and we cannot stay in a unified or only way narrative to discuss the different issues. And I think that's completely connected with the next panelist, that it's Palmajot Kaus, who's a journalist that received a grant from the Pulitzer Center as well. And Palmajot, the floor is yours to share your experience. I know you have been working with Just Transition as well, and the connection between climate and labor.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm joining you all from India, and up until yesterday I was based in this state of India called Jharkhand, which is one of the oldest coal-rich states in India. And since the last 2 years, so I'm a journalist and a filmmaker. Since the last 2 years, my work was focused on this film that I did from Jharkhand, which was about documenting, the aspirations of a community from a coal-rich state in a country which is one of the largest coal-producing states as well. So India is in a conundrum, is in a dilemma, because it's a developing nation. It needs coal to produce. It needs this fossil fuel for electricity generation to reach households, because homes don't have electricity in the country, most rural parts of the country. And at the same time, we know that the community's aspirations, the community wants to move to more dignified forms of work, which is beyond coal work. Why did I say more dignified forms of work? Because in India, the labor which is in the coal sector is predominantly informal, which means there's no social security, and there are no strict wage sort of norms for labor in different areas of the coal region. And so there are three top things that I had documented even in the film and even during my research, is that in the informal sector, the biggest challenge that even unions, nationally, they are trying to grapple with this challenge, is that informal workers are not, there's no data on how many informal workers, in which form are they dependent, what kind of work are they doing, how many, in which region, are they doing, how many are loading trucks, how many are just selling coal on cycles and bicycles in these unorganized markets. So that's one. The second thing is, because there is historically, India is a country where labor laws are not enforced, in compliance with the law. And so there's poor labor law enforcement, and so that's the other thing which is documented in the film. And in terms of the third thing in the film is the community's perspectives and the aspirations that's documented. So a large part of the community in a coal-rich, state where almost an entire village is dependent on mining, on the coal mine that's there next to the village. So in some parts of those villages and in some parts of the region, there are people there's a community which sees the energy transition as an opportunity for them to organize, for them to talk about, for them to see avenues outside of coal work, because historically informal coal work is not a dignified form of work. So they see this as an opportunity for a larger social security measure that can take workers beyond coal work. The second interesting, again, the dilemma or the conundrum is that and a gender perspective that comes in coal labor is that a lot of women who are in the informal sector, they find some sort of financial security in the mines when they go out and do even basic coal picking, which is usually done by hand by women. So they get the opportunity to step out of homes and do even that kind of work, because otherwise they would not find any work, and even if they found work, it would just be working as household maids somewhere else. So this is a tension which not just community leaders but even members in the union who are speaking with people on the ground, communities in the coal dependent regions in the country, is that most of the women don't want to work beyond coal. They want to keep being dependent on the little job that this fossil fuel provides. So this is the other tension that's documented in my work. The last thing I would like to add about the unions is that I happened to meet a labor union in this town called Ramgarh, which is one of the oldest coal towns, and almost 50% of mines in that area were shut down because of unprofitability. But the way they were shut down, they were not shut down using proper closure mechanisms. So a lot of workers who were dependent on those mines, some of them were transferred, some of them retired, but some of them just faced job loss because one day there was a mine and then the company decided to shut it, so there was no mine, and a lot of other peripheral work around that mine, a few shops, a little market that was running, the city, the area which was buzzing because of that mine also suffered. So there was this domino effect that happened when these mines were shut down without proper operating mechanisms and closure mechanisms laid down by the coal company. So the unions are currently in that region specifically, they are dealing with these historical sort of injustices that have happened, right? So new forms of organizing and new forms of unionizing is still a very new nascent sort of an idea, which is still stemming and coming up in the union politics in this region specifically of Jharkhand. And the last thing, in 2006, India, like Joanna had mentioned, there are new forms of unions of workers. They are organizing in new forms. So one of them is this new trade union initiative, which is they're a union which are working on the aspect of energy transition and how they can do it. And I would just like to put one of their perspectives out there. Their perspective is, and as a journalist and my research, I feel their perspective is fair enough, which is that India, like I said earlier, is a country that needs industry to develop. So it needs fossil fuel burning, unfortunately, to progress, at the same time addressing the climate change issue, and at the same time the development issue. So India is a developing nation. It needs to continue to develop and work towards climate. So this union and so it's working between, so it's straddling between these two things, right? That we need more minds. We need to work on historical injustices that have happened with workers, unfortunately, with the lack of labor law enforcement. And at the same time, we need more coal mines. And at the same time, so actually the fact says that India is in, I mean, by 2030, we need to bring down our coal, but more and more coal mines are coming up in India. And at the same time, there are renewable sources of energy that are also coming up. So this is happening in two different geographies of the country at the same time, which, a few unions say that, it's kind of necessary. So, and I see some facts on the ground which do kind of say, do show that this is true as well. So this is broadly what I had to share.
Thank you so much, Payunjot. I'll now pass to Mick Young.
Hi, everyone. It's already 9:30 p.m. here in Korea. And I'm the International Director of the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions. And my main job is introducing what we are doing in Korea to the international trade union movement or international society. So it is very honor to me joining this workshop. And I have a lot to share with you, but maybe I will start with what the KCTU has been doing for the last 30 years, because we are with 1 year ahead of our 30 years anniversary. And we are spending a lot of time to evaluate what we have been achieved so far and how we can establish our new strategy for the next 30 years. So I will use the introductory segment to introduce about what we have been doing for the last 30 years. Actually, KCT was established in 1995, and it was an outcome of the broader social movement for democracy under the military dictatorship in 1980s, and the following great worker struggle to democratize the workplaces. So in August, September in 1987, new democratic and independent trade union was established in daily basis, and these 3 months, around 3,000 trade unions were established in the workplaces where the yellow union was dominated, or there's no union at all. So these organizations became form a regional or national-wide organization, and that became the KCTU later on. And upon the establishment, we are facing the global, or especially East Asian financial crisis in 1997 and 1998. And the IMF came in and they launched the neoliberal labor policies, including the flexibilization of labors, including the mass layoff systems for the economic difficulties, and flexible working hour system and flexible employment system. So at that time, we to cope with these difficulties, we adopted 3 major strategies, and we have been continue to implement this strategy at workplaces and in society. The number 1 strategy was establishing the industry-wide trade unions, because at that time, Korean trade union movement was based on the enterprise level, and sharp increase of the unemployed workers due to the financial crisis, and the duplication of the various forms of flexible types of employment, including the disguised independent contractors or multiple layered of subcontracting workers and so on. So to organize and strengthen the unity among workers, regardless of their employment status, or employment, and to narrow the gap among the workers, we believe that we need to organize our union at national level or industry level, not enterprise level. And the second one is political empowerment or working classes, or became trade union as a core part of the broader social movement. So we believe that we have to have the representation in the political arena, and we have to build a social movement to pursue kind of a change of the workplaces and the society as a whole. And we believe that we have to be very open to the new issues beyond the issues at the workplaces to make some changes in the society. And third one is the strategic organizing, because it is very difficult to organize the workers at workplace level trade union activities. So we decided to allocate our budget. We gave the priority for the organizing campaign in terms of financial resources and human resources and so on. And at the confederation level, based on the research or analysis of the labor market, we decided to some targeted area for organizing, including, for example, migrant workers or workers and small and micro-sized enterprises where union establishment is very, very difficult. So as an outcome of this effort, the membership of the KCTU, comparing to the time of our establishment, it increased by 3 times. So that's why we are representing the 1.2 million. It's not the big number because of the trade union movement is very difficult because of the hostile attitude of the government, as well as the union busting strategy of the big conglomerates like Samsung and Hyundai and so on. So now we are facing some new issues to be tackled by the trade union. The number one question is what is work and who is the work, and who should be covered by the labor law. I will go into detail later on. And we are facing demographic change in Korean society. The birth rate is going down, and we are the lowest country in terms of the birth rate. And the proportion of the elderly people in our whole population is keep increasing. So we have to reorganize the whole society to cope with this. So we are campaigning for to increase more better work in care sector, and we are trying to reduce the working hour. And we also try to establish a kind of gender equality in a society and in the workplaces as well. And the climate change is another challenge we are facing. So we adopted just transition as a new strategy. And we are also doing a lot of work on this. I will go into detail later. But we also believe that to tackle the climate changes in the workplaces, or to realize the just transition, we need more trade union rights. We have to be organized beyond the enterprise level, and we have to bargain collectively with the employers beyond the issue of the working conditions to realize just transition. And we have to able to strike over the climate change issues and so on. So that's why we are trying to revise the trade union law, which we can expand our trade union activity on broader social issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. I think we will start with a couple of questions and then the last 30 minutes to open to the audience, but also please feel free to share on the chat if you want to add or ask any questions. The first questions we thought about was exactly on who are the workers, but I think everyone here has shared and with their experience and with their presentation, the different realm of workers that we can see. So we are talking about yoga teachers and tech workers. We are talking about gig workers, codependent, the workers represented in trade unions. We didn't touch a lot on this is on the realm of production workers, of course, but there is always reproduction work. And I think it speaks to her questions of who are the workers and who are the works that have rights to be organized, and to be represented on this trade. So I will jump this one because I thought there was an interesting introduction of how diverse it is, the spectrum of who we are talking about. And I will enter on why do you think people organize themselves? You all have talked about huge challenges. No, I think Eyüp have talked about the lack of how hard it is to actually to organize in Turkey and how the configuration and the context make it almost impossible to people be able to have a formal representation. Paiwanjot shared a little bit more about on this challenging. Sorry that the word sometimes missing. English is not my first language, but on the challenges imposed by climate change and how the government is imposing a new legislation that it's completely new or non-understood by the workers in the field itself, and how the contradiction, I think that's the word, how is the contradiction of what is maybe a Western view or what is maybe a nation-state view versus what people need to do to put food on their plate. So it's a more on the field reality. So I wanted to ask, those are contradictions and those are challenges that exist for hundreds of years, for the decades, and they exist not only in the places that you come from, in the realities that you come from, but everywhere, as we know. But you all have examples of people that have organized themselves and have decided to be together and to do something about it. Why would you say that happened? Why did people start to organize? And that can be formal and non-formal organization, but on the trade side, why do people look for the trade and what is that relationship? So it would be great to hear from you.
Who starts? So I don't.
Can be you. You open the mic.
Yeah, that was my mistake. So yeah, well, why people organize themselves? There's always this easy answer, so that they can improve their daily life, they can improve their wages, their working conditions, and etc. This is the easy answer and the most common answer. Of course, when in countries like Turkey or in Korea, why people would take all that risk to organize themselves, even though they know that they will be dismissed, and there will be court cases against themselves, and there will be maybe even violence in some cases and so on. Why would you do that? That's, of course, mostly to improve their working conditions. As I said, it's a matter of breadth, but not just breadth, but also the dignity. So that you, in order to make sure that your voice is being heard in your workplace, that's an issue of let's say, dignity in a way. Because in a workplace, when there's no union, when there's no representation of the workers, when you are alone in the work floor, then you don't have enough power, actually no power, to defend your dignity, to defend yourself, actually. So it's most of the time organizing, as far as what we can see from our case in Turkey, it's about breadth and also dignity. And sometimes the issue of dignity, I don't know if dignity is the right word, but yeah. I don't have nuances in English. Maybe there's more nuanced word for that, but yeah, I don't know. So dignity is important for them, even more than the working conditions. Sometimes people say that, okay, I can be jobless for 2-3 months, but at least I won't have to hear this guy complaining about my work and so on and so on. And yeah, why people organize? To make sure that their voice is being heard in their workplace. It's why people vote for government. It's again, it's a democracy. There's a democracy at the workplace, which makes sure that you will have a better conditions, but also to defend your dignity. Yeah.
If I can join that, I think that this is a very good answer. And I think that sometimes when I hear discussions about unions, I think like we're being very harsh on unions, or rather, we expect a lot from them, because the original mission of the unions was to be that workplace voice, to give workers a way to collectively bargain against their employer. And now we are discussing a lot about challenges that really go beyond that original mission, whether we talk about, climate change or migration, or, these are broader social issues that, and I think the unions are doing a great job at trying to connect the labor struggles with the climate change struggles, with the migration, or like in Berlin with the housing crisis. But this is really beyond that original union mission, and connects to a broader discontent within the society, with what has been the mantra for many states. And I think you touched on that, the neoliberalization. Yes, we talk about just transition in Western country, but there's very little retraction from that original idea that profit and profitability is the governing principle for our economy, even at the price of extraction of natural resources, or the exploitation of workers. And neoliberalization also means that there were a lot of loopholes that were left on purpose in the labor law, that fossil fuels or technology giants are taking advantage of. And that is becoming more and more obvious to workers in a lot of sectors. And I think they're getting upset, because it's just got to a point where, if workers don't organize, like not only the working conditions, but the entire future of the planet is on the line. So I think this paradox of them going a bit too hard might actually be contributing to the somehow a renewal of the labor movement from the bottom up.
Yeah, I also agree the answers from Ayub and Joanna. And there are a very famous saying in Korea: when we ask people why you want to be a trade unionist, or why are you taking your employment security or even life to become a union member, and the answer is always like, I want to live as a human being. And when there is one story from cleaning workers in a university, and she after she joining the union and accomplished a successful strike in the union, she said that what the union changed my life. Before I joined the union, I always worked some places are very invisible. But after I am joining a union, I became visible, and I'm very proud of my work and so on. And people call me as a how do you say, with my name, not a kind of how do you call it? I don't find the exact term in English. Anyway, she said that I am being respected by other peoples in my workplaces. So the organizing means kind of power. So we need a power not only to change the individual working conditions and wages and so on, but because we want to solve a lot of problems we are facing in the workplaces and society, and we want to be organized to become kind of protagonist or major actors in the social change.
Majat, would you like to add?
No, I think their experience answered the question. I think I'll sit this one out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. I will do one more, and if others have a question, please drop it on the chat or raise your hand. We'll be happy to open the mic. If not, I can keep going. But before we do that, I wanted to touch on the just transition and the interconnection between climate and labor. I think you all touched on that issue, and it is a two-lens problem. No, because I think in one side, a couple of you mentioned how big is the challenge on the field itself, on literally on workers afraid of losing their jobs, or narratives that are common in the environmental field being very distant to the reality on the ground, and not having a direct perspective of what will happen to them in the future, or not having policies in place for these transitions to happen. But on the other lens, I think this is more on the environmental side, on the environmental field, is when we talked about just transition, or when we talked about climate change, we are always talking about us as humanity that are responsible to the climate change. And in the great acceleration period, that is the last 60 years, all the activities that we are doing, from coal mining and the different types of extractions that we do in the world, as agents responsible for this climate change. But we are not talking about for what happened, who were the laborers in that for that acceleration to happen. You know, who were the ones that were losing their life or their dignity or excess of labor to that acceleration to happen. So workers are on one side affected for the history perspective of climate change, to get where we got. They were already affected, lives were already lost some dignity in the past, but also looking at the futures, you all are sharing this challenge of feeling unsafe, or how a just transition will look like. Not that doing what they do or the way they are doing in those extraction fields means that they have the workers' rights they deserve, but at the same time feeling lost of what can happen in the future. So I would like to hear from all of you, in your experience, in your fields, how is the climate change being seen in these two perspectives, from the perspective of being affected, or high temperatures in their fields, or having to immigrate, or having to adapt to the reality that climate change imposes, but the other way, their fear of losing jobs, or their fear of having their field alterated, and we have a huge lack of legislation to that in general, worldwide. So if you could speak to both questions, would be lovely. And if you want to start, please open the mic.
Yeah, I will go first. In Korea, like many other countries and many other governments, the government of Korea also introduced the 2030 NDC and the goal for the net zero by 2050. And under this plan, the most affected sector, especially our members, is the auto sector, which the electric vehicle is the main product. And the other sector is energy. So at this moment, the proportion of coal-fired power plant is the largest, but it should be changed to the renewable energy sources. So that in that situation, the KCTU is adopted just transition as our strategy. And our understanding of just transition is the workers are most affected people from the climate changes. In terms of jobs, like in auto sector I mentioned, their work will be changed, and the skill building and training should be changed as well, and the whole process of the production should be changed, and the workers in energy sector as well, and also the existing climate changes or weather, extreme weather, like extreme heat wave in the summer and extreme cold in the winter, it directly affects to the working conditions of the workers who are working outdoor and so on. So we need a lot of strategy to face these challenges. So the workers are most affected people from the climate change itself, and workers should be the decision makers for the transition. So far, the Korean government introduced all the laws and the basic plans for the reduction of emission without consultation or without participation of the workers. So we are insisting that we need collective bargaining at sectoral level, or we need a consultation at the national level to the workers who are who understand the best about the reality of the working places, should be decision maker at the time of the transition. But to do this, we are established our own institution within the KCTU, and we also are working with a lot of environmental or climate justice movements to build a kind of climate actions and climate strike and so on. And we also try to bargain with the employers' representative on the issue of climate change. So we call it as a green collective bargaining. And we also try to build the international solidarity for the just transition. And the most important thing for us is the trade union law, the legal system, and the labor relations system is very, very repressive, like in Turkey. And the agenda for the collective bargaining and agenda for the strike is very, very limited. So if you asking collective bargaining with your employers about the government policies is illegal. And if you are working as a subcontracting workers in a, for example, coal-fired power plant, and you are asking collective bargaining or consultation with the principal employer about the issues over the employment security at the time of transition, it is illegal. And you cannot strike over this issue in the legal system in Korea as well. So that's why we are trying to revise the trade union law to expand the justifiable strike or agenda items for collective bargaining, which is directly related to the issue of just transition.
I'd like to add to that question, Flora, if that's okay. You know, the intersection of climate and labor is pretty interesting to me, especially in the context of Jharkhand. As I described the geography to you all, is that, you know, it's one of India's largest coal-rich states. And you know, the extraction, there are no, I wouldn't say climate impacts, but we all know, of course, you know, natural resource extraction has its environmental impact. And, you know, and India is still largely a very agrarian economy. And Jharkhand, of course, was also, it's also home to large indigenous communities of India, which are dependent on forest produce. You know, with extraction came the reduction of forests. With extraction came loss of agricultural land. So there is this community right now in Jharkhand which gave their lands away to coal companies for coal extraction, which literally gave their livelihoods away to coal companies. They gave their forests and agriculture in lieu of jobs in some cases. And the jobs were provided, and I'm talking about, you know, almost 2 decades ago, the policies that were there in Jharkhand. I mean, their jobs were provided, but again, the jobs were these jobs were those which did not require high skill or high education. So the community has remained unskilled over these decades, and the community is still unskilled, and to such an extent that the community now, which is now landless, the community suffers from environmental degradation in the area, and today is a multi-dimensionally poor community with, you know, their levels of education are low, and there is hardly any skill set. So this is what has happened now, and in this, you go to a community member and say energy transition, and you translate the whole term into the native language. There's hardly any translation to that. And then you go to the community and talk about this. They're like, what? I mean, this is I'm simplifying it down, but you know, it doesn't sit well with them. It doesn't sound well to them. And so one of the things I think, which it's something that even the unions are unable to do, I feel, is that you know, like I said, the energy transition, especially in an area like this, which has, you know, brought down levels of quality of life of people down by a lot of notches, is I think, I don't know, maybe a skill redevelopment programs. Of course, I mean, we talk about this, education programs, but it cannot still be like a, you know, somebody coming from the top to the bottom in a coal village and saying, hey, let's start learning from now on, or let's, you know, I don't know. But maybe there are community interactions, or maybe there are community driven programs that can be funded, that can be scaled, that can be, you know, there are community leaders in these coal areas which encourage families to not take their children to the coal mines to help them gather coal, because I mean, child labor is rampant in coal, because a family would you know, want more members to bring enough coal back home so that they can sell more and earn more. So if you're a pair of hands, unfortunately, people, you know, even so there is child labor in these areas. So can an energy transition turn these challenges on its head? Can policies and the framework, can the money that's flowing, or you know, be flown to those places or brought to those places where you know, technical institutions can be set up, technology can be leveraged for coal dependent youth to you know, learn? And can renewables come into this region? Because again, in India, because there is extreme environmental degradation in the coal belt, which is mostly in the eastern part of the country, the entire renewable project is either in the western or in the southern part of the country. So can we marry this? Can unions bring this into the politics of the region? Is something that I, as a journalist, keep asking myself when I meet community and go out on the field. So yeah, these are just my thoughts.
Joanna?
Do you want to go first, maybe?
Oh, no. Last time I was the first, now I have to be last.
I see a follow-up question, whether that would be something useful in the German context. I actually wanted to bring you an example from the more traditional union, because newly established worker organization doesn't necessarily mean outside of unions. We have in Berlin for a couple of years now, right outside of Berlin, Tesla has set up its gigafactory here. So a traditional union has to start from scratch, organizing in what is the main field of organization for this. So a major trade union is trying to set up a worker organization in a company, which is in many ways identified with just transition because it produces electric cars. And in general, I don't think German unions have such a hard time making the just transition part of their mission, but this is not without inherent ambivalences. And this example of Tesla really shows this well, because on one hand, we have electric cars. On the other hand, we have a really unchecked growth for profit that is not compatible with climate needs. So it is not surprising that ecological activists disturbed the plant operation by putting a fire, because a planned expansion of this factory would mean cutting more trees and threatening the water supply of the entire community of people that live right outside of Berlin. So what should a union do in this case? And this is not an easy answer, because that would that mean that the union should oppose the expansion of the Tesla factory and oppose the provision of more jobs? What is really the workers' interest in this case? It's hard to define this interest, because the workers might not even live in the vicinity of the plant. Actually, in fact, many are transnational workers that come on buses from Poland, the 200 kilometers there. So I think it's really about understanding that workers are more in this interrelated system, and profit is generated, but without their participation. In this case, IG Metall is having a very hard time setting up even a worker representation, because it's facing a very aggressive union busting from Elon Musk. And this union busting logic has made it, unfortunately, to many sectors here in Germany through this ideology of Silicon Valley, which has never been really friendly to unions. So what does it mean for unions to oppose that? I think that it means expand this general challenge to the profit as a main motive, because what is produced is often good for capital, but it's not good for the land and the life of people that inhabits it. And I think the mission of unions here is to focus on the quality of life demands. These are also feminist demands, to pay attention to the impact that work has on our bodies, on our ability to care for ourselves and for others. This has and is becoming part of the mission, and yeah, that's a way for them also to stay relevant.
So I will first start with Flora's question on the historical perspective. So responsibility of the humanity. There is no such thing as homogeneous group as humanity, actually. So my ancestors were not the shareholders of Shell or British Petroleum. So my ancestors are not doesn't have the same responsibility. I wish they had, by the way, but anyway, so it's already a missed opportunity. So we don't have the same responsibility as the humanity anyway. So always, so it's there's always this discussion about Anthropocene or Capitalocene. I'm mispronouncing the both words, but anyway, so it's not the human responsibility. It's the responsibility of the capitalism in a way why this climate crisis has developed in this way. So that's why there's no mutual responsibility, or there's no equal responsibility on these issues, and as you already mentioned. So, and that's why also when we come to today's discussion on who will pay the price for this crisis, since we don't have the equal responsibility in the past, we don't have to pay it equally today as well. So that's why there has to be some burden on those who already exploited the world and made profits out of it. And when it comes to the trade unions discussions on the climate crisis and all these just transition issues, so this discussions always takes place in a wrong dichotomy. So most of the time they come to you and they tell that you have to line up behind your boss, behind your company, otherwise you will lose your job. So if you are working in a car company which produce internal combustion engines, and then they say that, look, you have to go on this production as long as we can, or we will lose our jobs. But that's a wrong dichotomy. So there is already a huge increase of productivity over the many years. There's this example of Keynes. He was studying in 1940s. He was telling that, well, in the future, there will be so much increase in the productivity. We will only have to work 15 hours a week. today we have that increase of productivity. That's true. But who gets that gains of productivity? It's the bosses, it's the employers who gets that gains of that productivity. So we don't work 15 hours, we work 45 hours. So that's why when they come to you and they say that, look, you have to produce more internal combustion engines, otherwise you will lose your job. So either you keep your job or you keep your planet. Then you have to say that, look, there is already too much work for the society. We don't divide the work equally. That's the main problem there. So if we would reduce the working time, then we wouldn't have this discussion at all. So that's why most of the time when the just transition or the climate crisis debate comes to the trade unions, it comes with a wrong dichotomy to force them to choose certain roads. It's like that there is no alternative, so that you have to give up on some of their rights that your company can survive. Also, you have to give up from your planet as well. So that's one part of the discussion. And the second question is from on the chat. Actually, it's from Fiona, I guess, about what Miki mentioned. So actually, if you look at the history of the trade unions, it has always been like that. So trade unions are organizations not only restricted to the workplace, but they have responsibility for the entire society. And there were times in the past that trade unions were taking the streets for peace or against war. There were times that trade unions were taking the streets for various social rights or for the benefit of the entire society. But today, this current industrial relations systems always tries to restrict the union to the workplace. And that's why, especially in countries like Turkey or even Korea, then that's why they always restrict the right to strike only for collective bargaining process, only after certain steps and certain procedures and etc. But actually, trade unions are organizations of societal change as well. So that's why they should be able to take up the streets on many issues which will affect the daily life of the workers. And that's why right to strike shouldn't be limited only just for the workplace issues. And actually, that's also what is written in the ILO Committee of Freedom of Associations principles as well. So political strikes, protest strikes, solidarity strikes, these shouldn't be prohibited to the workers. And yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
Thank you so much. We have more 15 minutes and we have 2 questions on the chat. So I thought about reading the 2 of them and maybe 1 or 2 of you answers each one. So we have time to tackle both. I'll start with the latter because it's alongside the discussions that we are having now. Along the lines of Tesla example, how should unions approach the ever-increasing globalization of corporations? Is advocating for local working conditions sufficient, or do we need a more coordinated approach across national borders, especially considering wicked global problems such as climate change? And I already read the second one, so we do a round. Thanks for the great input. I'd love to hear what the panelists think about the role of the internet. On the one hand, all the possibilities for workers to connect, share information, and etc. On the other hand, the fear that people only participate in online click activism and don't join organizations and go out into the street anymore. What's your sense on the potentials, but also the risks of the ubiquity of online communications for the unions? So I think we could start with the first one I read to continue the conversation and then finalize with the challenge on the internet. Anyone would like to go first, or if you want to go the other way around?
I can start maybe. I think the idea that the unions should approach the ever-increasing globalization of the corporation is certainly the right one. But again, we're talking about a very, very big task for unions. And as much as unions have, and I hope that they will continue to play a major role in our democracies, I think this is also a task for just broadly citizens and our governments to reach that and international cooperation, because this is not an even fight. This is not an even fight because the international corporations have just so much more power and so many more resources at their disposals. And this really ties to the second question about the role of the internet and the role that the digital transformation has played. I mean, on one hand, we are talking about the rise of the tech giants, which are now more powerful than some of the states, right? So the tech giants are a great example of what corporations can do and how hard it would be for unions to oppose that, because it's just really unmatched power. But the second thing I want to talk about is, it's beyond just these couple companies. There's just, and technology has, and corporations have really used technology consistently to limit and oppose workers' voice, not only to create workplaces that are fragmented, like platform work is a great example, but because they can use technology to do worker surveillance. That means that they can also squash union formation in very early stages, but they also use algorithmic management or AI to control the workers. And they basically started treating workers as a source, as another resource for extractions, because now they're using data that is produced in the workplace as another source of profit. So really, technology has had very negative and will continue to have very negative consequences for the workplaces unless we, of course, decide to regulate that. And I think unions have been very active in lobbying for better regulation of technology in the workplace. But we also see, and this goes back to the question of whether it has positive potential. Of course it does. We've seen, in history of unions really started with like this idea of mutualism. And I studied the algorithmic form of mutualism in workplaces like platforms, where workers just share the way that algorithms control them, and then that forms solidarity, and from this solidarity an work organization emerges, and then really this thing that happens behind the scenes, this intense communications, is something that we see in a platform after platform after platform. This is not usually, it starts from this discussion about between the workers before, of course, then it goes to the streets and then unions take interest. But yes, the ability for workers to also connect through platforms or about platforms has also been very positive. And the platform workers have organized hundreds and hundreds of protests around the world, and it's really been a positive example of the labor renewal.
Maybe because of time. Yeah, no, I was going
Okay.
to. Maybe because of time, I think we can get one more answer. Ayub, please jump in if you're going to share.
No, if there's someone else, it's better. I will just, yeah. If not, I will. Okay. I will be very quick. So on the cross-border solidarity issue, so that's already trade unions are trying to do. That's what my job is. That's what Mikyung's job is actually. So of course, there's always this trial for more solidarity among the trade unions. It's not always that easy because everyone has their own power, own problems in their workplace, and they have to defend their own members in their workplace. And the companies are quite resourceful and quite talented to use workers against each other. So in that case, this cooperation sometimes became competition. For example, if you're a trade union in a Western European company, then you already have some problems to solve in your workplace. If someone from Turkey or Korea asks solidarity about their problems in their country, then your employer would say to you that, yeah, do you want us to move our production to some places, or don't you want us to solve your problems for us? Why do you care about those things? So there is always ongoing cooperation between the unions. By the way, it bears results so many times, and so many times it fails to bear any results. So that's how life is anyway. So, but there is no ideal world, so where this perfect cooperation, perfect solidarity works out, but there's always a trial for that. And the second issue is about this internet organizing. I guess that's a bit more difficult thing to discuss. Of course, internet is a tool, and it's always better to use the best tools you have in your hand. But in Turkey, we have this word. It doesn't make much sense, but maybe you translate it. But being organized and being registered to a union are two different things. So just because you are registered to an organization, it doesn't mean that you are organized. When you are organized, it means you are part of something, that you built that thing. So in Turkish word, it makes better sense. But anyway, so you don't know Turkish, that's your fault anyway. But anyway, so being organized is something else. So you became part of something. You do things by yourself. And when it comes to the discussions over internet and these kind of things, these are not exactly most of the time real discussions, these click activism things. So you are not able to convince each other when you just share your positions on the internet. That's why that's not an organizational discussion in most of the cases. That's why it makes it almost impossible to build an organization or being organized over internet. It's just being registered to an organization, share your view, true, but it's not a common discussion. You are not able to convince each other in this way. But of course, it's a tool. It's always better to use the tools you have in your hands. In the past, we were printing leaflets. Now we don't have to print them to share your views. But it's always better to bring people together to be able to discuss. Of course, now we can come together through Zoom as we do now. So.
Thank you so much to the four amazing panelists. I think, of course, all that we discussed today, they are not easy questions, and even less, we don't have easy answers for all those. But I think this feeling of displacement, on those contradictions, they are important to us as thinkers or as workers or as people that are thinking how we should organize, how we can bridge the challenge. It's a way that we can expand our political imagination and expand how the climate think goes to the worker thinks, and how the labor rights goes to the climate thinking. And we expand these frontiers that the internet sometimes help, but they sometimes also, as we all know, create bubbles. So at the same time, we have help, we have challenges, and putting so many different voices in a place like this is, for me, a great way to make these bridges and expand this imagination. So thank you so much. I'll pass to Fiona that will do a final closing line.
Thanks a lot, Flora, Joanna, Pamanjot, and Mikyung, but also everybody else was talking in the chat. I'm inclined to ask Isabel to do one tiny reflection before I do a final closing, just because you've been so active in the chat and also sharing your thoughts. Would you mind sharing like one or two of your thoughts coming out of this, Isabel?
Oh, thank you, Fiona. But you're taking me a bit on a cold here, and I'm very bad at 1 minute sentence. But thank you so much, everyone. The three panelists were really very inspirational. And I think maybe one key takeaway to me is that we are here really in a truly global, transnational conversation. And that's very inspiring to see the power of workers, organizations capable to listen and understand each other, and seeking to build ties where everything is done to cut ties between workers so that they prioritize the profit of their own corporation versus the solidarity across humanity. So that's super inspiring, and that, I guess, that's the force that drives all the attempts to fight together in understanding the problem of the days, and in trying to find the right organizing strategies. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Isabel. I definitely agree, and for me this was also I love that we had a panel coming in on this topic from a wide range of countries, but also a wide range of perspectives on this issue, because I think that's what's needed in this discussion. And it's clear that we had a very huge and broad topic to this, but that's also because we want to open up this conversation a bit more about some of these larger macro issues, right? Because yes, international solidarity is needed, but also on the ground organizing is needed. So both is needed in this discussion. I'm gonna round us off because I also want people to enjoy their Friday. But I'm really thankful for all of your time at this session, for your really great and nice ideas. As I mentioned, we will be sharing the recording with you all. Feel free to share it with others as well. Please let me know if you want to be cut out of the recording, or if something else you would not like to be shared, then we'll be mindful of that. If you would like to be in touch with some of the speakers today or others you've been engaging with in the chat, please do let us know. We can put you in touch with other people. And Shansu is sharing our next webinar session, which will be on June 7th, which is also part of our webinar series together with Democratizing Work and WageIndicator. So feel free to sign up for that already if you can. And wishing you a very happy Friday. Good weekend, and thanks a lot for all your time and nice discussion. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.